our channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Zaporozhye direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. During the previous 24 hours, lots of changes on the ground were recorded. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 28th of October of 2025, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 29th of October. As you can see, the armed forces of the Russian Federation continue advancing further in the western direction from the settlement by the name of Poltavka. Now the Russians in this area are focused to maintain the line, to shorten the distances, and to get as close as possible to the next defense layer. We're talking about the villages by the name of Veselye, Zeleny Gai, and Chervone. The Russians are trying to get these villages from the east. As soon as the Russians are able to get these lines, and most likely this is going to happen in coming days, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from these territories further in the western direction, because they have no chances to save control over the settlements if Russians attack this territory from the east and the northeast. Furthermore, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the settlements of Krasnogorsk and Rybna. These are the last settlements along the river of Yanchul around the Uspenovka fortified area. So the Russians continue advancing, and this information during the previous 12 hours was confirmed both by neutral mappers and by pro-Russian sources. Furthermore, some pro-Russian sources reported that the clashes for these two territories have already begun. Maybe in coming days, in 2 or 3 days, these villages would be captured by Russians completely, and we will color this territory in the complete Russian control. Furthermore, the sources are saying that the Russians continue advancing or began clashes for the settlement of Veselye. The Russians are trying to answer the settlement of Vishnyovo from the south, and several pro-Russian sources reported that they managed to answer the village from the east, and that there are very heavy clashes on this territory. Furthermore, some sources reported that Russians improved their positions in the northern direction and managed to capture this company's stronghold. Now Ukrainians are blocked on the territory of Vishnyovo without any chances to get supply and support from the mainland. Ukrainians are no longer able to use this road for supply support of their contingent on the territory of Vishnyovo. The only way to do this is using drones, but Russians control this territory, and the village of Vishnyovo is not so big. It seems that in coming days this settlement would be also captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. The village of Vishnyovo is a very important and huge village with big number of buildings, like of facility type. So these territories could be used by Russians to concentrate units, to concentrate forces, to establish additional equipment, and to prepare a foothold before further offensive operation in the northern and the northwestern directions towards the settlements of Vidradne, Gai, Novoalexandrovka, and Danilovka. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Pokrovsk. The situation here remains tense, and it seems that Ukrainians will not be able to hold their positions on the territory of this agglomeration for a very long period of time. It seems that everything will be finished much faster than we expected. So before we start, let's discuss everything. Let's discuss the changes. So this is the situation by the end of the 28th of October of 2025, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 29th of October. The armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to answer the southern part of the settlement of Mirnograd. This information was confirmed by neutral mappers, and Russians managed to improve their positions in the northeastern part of the same settlement. So furthermore, we have adjusted the map in the eastern part of the city of Pokrovsk based on the video that was published by Ukrainian sources. Now let's discuss everything in details. According to information we have, the Russian armed forces are trying to gain a foothold on the outskirts of Mirnograd. This information was confirmed on TV by the spokesman for the Vostok Group of Forces, Captain Grigory Shapoval. In recent days, the Russian armed forces have been actively using equipment from the north and east to try to gain a foothold on the outskirts of the city. Street fighting continues. The defense forces of Ukraine are doing everything possible, destroying equipment and troops, but the factor of deteriorating weather conditions is taking its toll. So I would like to remind you that just yesterday we discussed this video, and this video shows the weather in the area of the city of Pokrovsk and the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Here we can see a fog, a real fog, and here we can see the vehicle of the armed forces of the Russian Federation that entered the eastern part of the city of Mirnograd. The Ukrainians were attacking this vehicle with FPV drones, but the most important is that Russian infantry managed to land. And most likely the clashes are taking place already for the territory of the Mirnograd citadel. Furthermore, today pro-Ukrainian sources published this video, a very important video published from the settlement by the name of Rih. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians with FPV drones across the settlement of Rih. There are lots of episodes, but Ukrainians were attacking just one building. So the Ukrainians were attacking this construction, which means that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. Based on this video and based on the reports that were published by different sources, including neutral mappers, we adjusted the map in the southern and the eastern parts of the city of Pokrovsk. So very important progress on the ground. Another important video was published by pro-Russian sources, so this is the video I'm talking about. Let's take a look at this video. Here we won't see Ukrainian drones forces or Russian forces. Here we won't see clashes on the ground that can give us, let's say, the right to adjust the map. Here we can see just a drone, a Russian drone that was launched by a Russian soldier. So what is so important in this video? The thing is that Ukrainian sources are saying that a week ago or a few days ago, the Russians were launching, or the Russians used to launch drones from the territory outside of the city of Pokrovsk. And this is probably the first proof that confirms that currently the Russians began launching their drones from the city limits. This is a very important, let's say, piece of news. But now this video, first of all, confirms that Russians are trying to use the southern citadel of the city of Pokrovsk in their purposes. Now the Russians are trying to establish the necessary communication equipment. The Russians are tasked to clear this territory and to prepare this territory for FPV drone forces. As soon as the Russians finish the clearing, as soon as the Russians establish FPV drone equipment, communication, radars, I don't know, different types of, let's say, communication lines, then from this very moment, the Russians will be able to establish complete and total control over the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration. And we need to understand that we are not talking about months or years. It will take 1, 2, or 3 days before Russians finish preparations, and then this is going to be a game over for the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. This citadel will be turned into the biggest base of FPV drone operators of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And from this perspective, Russians will be able to control not just the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration, but Russians will be able to control everything almost till the village of Dobropolye, till the city of Dobropolye. Furthermore, today, pro-Russian sources published lots of videos how they were repelling attacks carried out by Ukrainians yesterday and the day before yesterday. If you remember, yesterday the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that Ukrainians made several counterattacks with the purpose to unblock Ukrainians from the Pokrovsk agglomeration, but those attacks were repelled by Russians and the Ukrainians suffered huge losses. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that Ukrainians lost up to 180 soldiers. So as you can see, we have lots of episodes. We believe that yesterday and today the Ukrainians will continue attempts to unblock the, let's say, captured contingent. And today we're going to see more attacks from the Ukrainian side, and which is most important today, most likely the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will give us additional details about the situation and about the status of the Pokrovsk Cauldron. So now let's move further. And now let's talk about the Konstantinovka direction. According to different mappers, the Ukrainians were forced to fall back completely from the area to the south of the Kleban-Bytska water reservoir. And today, this information yesterday was provided by different neutral mappers, and today this information was also confirmed by another neutral mapper. So this is the situation on the ground. The Russians finished the battle for the Kleban-Bytska water reservoir, and in coming days we are waiting for more attacks from the Russian side in the direction of the city of Konstantinovka. Furthermore, the sources are saying that currently there are very heavy clashes for the southeastern part of the city of Konstantinovka itself. The Russians are advancing, trying to establish complete control over this part. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Liman direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. So this is the situation by the end of the 28th of October of 2025, and this is the situation by the 29th of October of 2025. As you can see, according to several sources, the Russians managed to capture up to 70% of the settlement of Yampol. Furthermore, this morning, several pro-Russian sources reported that the village of Yampol was captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation completely. So this information could be confirmed by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation today, and if it happens, of course, we will adjust the map. Furthermore, as you can see, the Russians are expanding their foothold in the forests to the east and the southeast of the settlement by the name of Liman. So now the Russians are trying to improve their positions, and they're trying to take as many as possible territories in this forest and to get as close as possible to the city or to the villages of Stary Caravan and Bruskovka. We discussed yesterday that there are very heavy clashes for TO513 road. The Russians are trying to force Ukrainians to fall back, and as soon as this happens, the Russians will begin offensive or their final offensive operation in the direction of the city of Liman. Ukrainians from these positions and from this configuration of the front line would not be able to hold their positions for a very long period of time, because the city of Liman is currently without any supply and support from the mainland. Ukrainians used to have logistic through the villages of Yarovo, Stepnogorsk, Svetogorsk and Drobyshevo, but this territory is under complete Russian control. Ukrainians are trying to send vehicles, light vehicles with some arms or probably with weapons, but everything that enters Yarova or Drobyshevo can be destroyed by Russians within seconds. So this territory is under complete control without any chances to, let's say, break through this territory and break through encirclement. Now let's talk about the city of Kupiansk. Today we are waiting for additional report from the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. Today most likely they will give us additional details about the situation in this area. As for geolocations, we have a video from the central part, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russian soldiers in the central part of the city of Kupiansk. So this is a very important video because I would like to remind you that according to different mappers, Russians managed to encircle this this micro district of the city of Kupiansk, and that several hundreds of Ukrainians were caught in Cauldron. And today we got video that confirms Russian progress in this area, which means that the Russians are about to finish the battle for this territory and for the entire western and the northwestern parts of the city. And then the Russians will continue advancing further, most likely in the southern direction to the city of Kupiansk-Kozlovoy, with the purpose to establish not just a drone but also a physical control over the territory. As for the city of Volchansk, the Russian offensive operation in this area intensifies. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. So this is the situation, for example, in this area by the end of the 27th of October of 2025, and this is the moment when the final phase of the battle for the city of Volchansk has begun. So this is the situation by the end of the 28th of October, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 29th. As you can see, the Russians are moving with the purpose to capture the settlement of Prilipovka. This will allow the Russians to improve logistics. Furthermore, the Russians, according to several sources, captured the settlement of Sinelnikova. This information was confirmed by neutral and pro-Russian sources, and the Russians finished the battle for the Volchansk citadel, the last citadel in the southern part of the settlement. So the Russians are about to leave the city limits of the city of Volchansk, and then they're going to just probably a few days left to finish the battle for the southern and the eastern parts, and then Russians will enter the Kharkiv operational space, and they will begin moving further in the direction of Belny Kolodys. So we expect that the Kharkiv offensive operation will only intensify, and the Russians will probably speed up their offensive and will increase their pace of the progress on the ground. And that's it for this short video on military summary. Channel reminds that we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.